A reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, says Koheleth, vanities of vanities. All things are vanity. Here is one who has labored with wisdom and knowledge and skill, and yet to another who has not labored over it, he must leave property. This also is vanity and a great misfortune. For what profit comes to man from all the toil and anxiety of heart with which he has labored under the sun? All his days, sorrow and grief are their occupation. Even at night, his mind is not at rest. This also is vanity. The word of the Lord.
Brothers and sisters, if you were raised with Christ, seek what is above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Think of what is above, not of what is on earth, for you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, your life, appears, then you too will appear with him in glory. Put to death, then, the parts of you that are earthly: immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and the greed that is idolatry. Stop lying to one another, since you have taken off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed for knowledge in the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcision and uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. The word of the Lord.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me." He replied to him, "Friend, who appointed me as your judge and arbitrator?" Then he said to the crowd, "Take care to guard against all greed. For though one may be rich, one's life does not consist of possessions." Then he told them a parable. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. He asked himself, "What shall I do? For I do not have space to store my harvest." And he said, "This is what I shall do. I shall tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I shall store all my grain and other goods. And I shall say to myself, 'Now as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong? Thus will it be for all who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich in what matters to God.'" The Gospel of the Lord. There are two main roles of a good preacher: to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning. Today's homily is a little bit more on the second half. If you're bothered by the end of this homily, then I've done my job. This gospel passage, and actually even the first reading, both are talking about inheritance, and really, in a sense, they're talking about priorities. What really matters? And to really get into this, I'm going to go one direction at first, and then I'm going to go in a completely different direction, so bear with me. So you get a small homily and then a longer homily. You're not going to like either one, at least if I do this right. The first bit is just talking about money, Frankly, as a priest, I don't like talking about money, so that's why I'm going to keep this on the shorter side. A lot of times people wonder, all right, am I giving enough to the church? Am I not giving enough to the church? Speaking of inheritance, do I have the church in my will? For the record, the biblical expectation of how much of your money you give to God has not changed. It's still 10%. Was in the Old Testament. Vatican II didn't change that. 10%. Now, most people in a Catholic church are going to gasp at that a little bit. In all honesty, most Catholics do not give 10% to their church. In fact, actually, we don't actually expect that. The Catholics tend to give in lots of different ways and lots of different manners. The church normally expects that you would give 5% to your parish, 1% to the diocese, 4% to other causes. That hits 10%, and by the way, it's not a maximum. You can actually go above that. Most parishes, the majority of people do not hit those bars, but that is the expectation of the church. Speaking from statistics, and I know the numbers here well enough, you are doing better than most Catholic parishes. You should be affirmed in that. You guys are doing better than most Catholic parishes. You're still not hitting that bar. You should be affirmed that you're doing well, but you should really let yourself be challenged. Am I doing what I can? Am I doing what I'm able to support my parish and other charities? And those of you who are looking at wills and such, these gospel passages are worth reflecting on. Am I leaving anything for God in my will? Money aside, I don't think monetary greed is a big issue here. Looking at how people give in this parish, I don't think monetary greed is where we really need to look at. I think probably what's harder is greed of time. And I'm speaking of myself in this. I can get very greedy with my own time. Am I giving of my time where I can? Am I doing what I can? And this is where I'm going to get a little pointed. And normally I try to give homilies that can fit for a 4-year-old as well as an 84-year-old, which that has a difficulty in itself. But this time I'm going to narrow down at a specific group of people. Parents. And I'm not talking about grandparents. Parents who still have your kids at home. It's important to really reflect on what we're teaching our kids by our priorities of time. How much do we really set God as our highest priority? I say this not because of anything that's going on in this parish particularly, but I've seen it so many times. So many times I've talked to parents that their kids are off in college or out of college, and the parents are saying to me, why don't my kids go to Mass? Why don't my kids take their faith seriously? And some of these parents I've known for years or even decades, and it honestly hurts my heart. It hurts my heart when I see the hurt in them, and I know the answer, and I can't tell them because it would hurt even more. These parents look at me and say, why don't my kids go to Mass on a regular basis? And I think back to when their kids were at home. And these same parents would give their kids excuses for missing Sunday Mass, particularly for sports. They would let their kids miss for sports about any religious event, but they would not let them miss a single sporting event, or they wouldn't let them miss a single band event or a single play or a practice. And what we end up doing without thinking about it is we end up telling our kids the coach is the most important person, because even a parent can't trump the coach, and God falls somewhere below the parent. Instead of really keeping our priorities in line and saying, you know what? Once in a while, my job as a parent is to tick off your coach. Once in a while, the job of a parent is to tick off a coach for the sake of saying, I rank above you in my child's life. And you know what? Sometimes as a parent, it's okay to say, you know what? I don't really want to go to Mass today either, and we're going. When you say that as a parent, when you say, I don't feel like going to Mass today, but we're going anyways, you're telling your children, God ranks above me. And it really is important that not by words, but by example, we teach our children God is first, then family, then other activities. It is so important to teach that. And honestly, parents, I don't envy you. I do not think that I'm not in some big bubble where I think it's easy to do what I've just asked of you. But it is so important. If you want your kids to practice their faith after they get out of your house, while they're in your house, you need to be saying to them by word and example, this is the most important thing we do. Grandparents, recognize it's not your place. It's not your place to tell your grandkids, tell your kids how to parent. It's your place to be supportive to them. And frankly, they need a lot of support because children are more booked than they've ever been. Back in the day, I do not remember that many people who were on 3 sports teams and 2 travel teams. Our children are overbooked. In all honesty, it's our fault as adults for letting it happen. We take away their childhood because we want to make sure they don't miss out on their childhood. Sometimes we're dumb. Sometimes we're dumb. But even as we struggle, it's important to recognize every parent is probably doing their best. And it just helps every once in a while to stop and reflect of, all right, what are going to be the priorities in my family? And how are we going to live that? For I want to teach my kids, I don't have any, you are my kids. I want to teach every child of our parish that more important than the things of this world, whether it's winning championships, whether it's having money, whether it's having lots of friends, more important than all of that is storing up treasure in heaven. Because there, the treasures there truly endure forever.